The following is a rebroadcast of the Channel 9 New Jersey Chamber of Commerce gubernatorial debate.
And welcome to the Birchwood Manor in Whippany, New Jersey. This is Debate 97. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ernie Anastos, and tonight we meet the candidates for the governorship of New Jersey. This debate is sponsored by the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce, by UPN 9, WWOR-TV, and by UPN 57 in Philadelphia. Now, let's meet the candidates. State Senator and Mayor of Woodbridge, Democrat Jim McGreevey. Ramapo College Professor, Libertarian Murray Sabrin. And New Jersey Governor, Republican Christie Whitman. And tonight's questions will come from a panel of three very distinguished journalists. I would like you to meet them right now. Michael Aron of the New Jersey Network, Renee Smith of UPN 57 in Philadelphia, and Herb Jackson of the Asbury Park Press. Okay, we want to go over a few ground rules before we get started. There will be no opening statements tonight, but there will be a closing statement from each of the candidates. The order of questioning was determined by a draw. The candidate answering a direct question will have 1 minute to respond, and the other two candidates are allowed 30 seconds for a rebuttal. The order will rotate, allowing candidates to take turns answering questions. And likewise, the panel members will change their order so that each panelist can pose a question to a different candidate. It is all going to come together once we get started. First, we have a word to our audience here tonight at the Birchwood Manor in Whippany. If you could please hold your applause until the end of the debate. I know that's going to be very difficult for you, but I will ask for your cooperation. Now let's begin the questioning. The first question goes tonight to Jim McGreevey from Michael Aron of the New Jersey Network. Michael?
Thank you, Ernie. Senator, auto insurance and property taxes have dominated this campaign. Let's start with auto insurance. You keep saying that Governor Whitman has granted 11 auto insurance rate increases. That's 11 companies, each getting a single increase. There are 66 auto insurance companies in New Jersey. Of the four largest, only one got one of those rate increases. 55 companies got no rate increases during the Whitman years, except the automatic annual rate increase under the bill you voted for in 1990. Is that record really so outrageous?
Yes. I believe the problems with this administration is that this governor is on the side of the auto insurance companies as opposed to us, the motoring public. I've set forth a very clear plan, a plan that provides for a 10% rollback, and most importantly, the need to prosecute fraud, not pay for it. $160 out of every $1,000 we spend in auto insurance today is just that fraud. We need to prosecute that fraud. And a public advocate. We need to have someone represent our interests. Now when there are rate increases, there are two people in the room, the insurance companies and the Department of Insurance. And we lose. Under Republican and Democratic governors, we've had a public advocate. We need someone on our side. My solution is to be on the side of the drivers. The governor's proposal, frankly, asks us to give up 25% of our coverage. That's the wrong approach. Government approach should be to ask the insurance companies to level out their profits and attack fraud.
Governor Whitman, 30 seconds to respond.
Well, first of all, you phrased it in the right way, Michael, and let me just say the only fraud in auto insurance right now is within the senator's proposal, because he knows that the 10% rollback, simply it can't happen. If it were that easy, I would have done it, Tom Kean would have done it, Jim Florio would have done it, or Brendan Byrne would have done it, because that's how long we've had the problem. And to say that a public advocate is going to make the difference is just layering on big government. We had a public advocate, and our auto insurance rates were the highest in the nation. The public advocate didn't help. What we need is the plan that I have before the legislature now that would enable drivers to drop their rates 25%.
Okay, Professor Sabrin, your turn.
My plan for auto insurance is very simple. Freedom. The longer version is more freedom. Everyone in this room knows that deregulation works in industry after industry after industry. Long-distance telephone service is down 50, 60, 70% because of deregulation. What we need is to get government out of micromanaging the economy. You know it. You're in the business world. The government cannot manage your business. It can never manage your business. And under my administration, rates will come down for consumers as we open up, free up the market, and get it underway.
We thank you. Our next question is for Governor Whitman, and it comes from Renee Smith of UPN 57 in Philadelphia. Renee?
Good evening, Governor Whitman. You said the best social program for families on welfare is a job. One concern expressed by a recipient and echoed by others is the lack of adequate paying jobs. Additionally, a recent Rutgers study questioned the quality of new jobs. How do you respond to this?
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that here in the state of New Jersey, we have increased jobs by over 200,000 since the day I took office. And that while we are seeing what that Rutgers study showed as a national trend, New Jersey workers still right now get 25% than their counterparts across the nation. We have the third highest annual wage in the nation. These are good paying jobs. But particularly for the group that you talk about, those coming off welfare, we need to have a mix of jobs because you're not going to move from welfare into mid-level management. That's why it's so important that we continue to focus on having a broad spectrum of the jobs, but we have geared all our programs to bring in the higher paying jobs. The Business Employment Incentive Program is one that is skewed to ensuring that they're higher paying jobs because that's what we want to see, and we want to continue to train people so they can move up the ladder from the entry-level positions to the mid-level positions.
Mr. Sabrin.
Everyone who has a job has skills. It could be low-level skills, medium-level skills, or high-level skills. We are in a high-tech economy. You need very good skills to get a good paying job. The problem that we have with welfare is people aren't trained properly, and that could be a function of the public school system. High school graduates should be able to get a job today given what they should be learning from K through 12. Now, since they don't have those skills, what happens now? What we need is a partnership between the business community, the welfare department.
Okay, thank you. Your time is up. Senator McGreevey?
Yes. The concern is Rutgers University reviewed, and over the past 4 years, 80% of wage earners in New Jersey lost in terms of real dollars. Our concern is that we've lost approximately 10% of our manufacturing base, replaced those high-quality jobs with 11% increase in food commercial. We need to provide for educational excellence, standards of excellence, not mediocrity. Those standards will provide for job training, which will ensure New Jersey's competitiveness for the job security market.
Let's continue our debate tonight. We have a question from Herb Jackson of the Asbury Park Press. This one is directed to Murray Sabrin.
Mr. Sabrin, your general political philosophy is that less government is better. Yet you do believe that government should regulate abortion procedures, which is ironically one area where your two opponents say government doesn't belong. Isn't this a contradiction?
Thanks for that question. I really appreciate that because it's something that I think many people misunderstand. The concept of when does life begin is crucial to this whole issue. If you believe that life begins at conception, then the unborn deserve constitutional protection. After all, the Constitution states the purpose of government is to protect life, liberty, and property. So if you define life at conception, that it begins at conception, then it's very simple. The conclusion follows from that premise, from that assertion. So it seems to me it's very simple that there's no contradiction whatsoever. We are a party that believes in the protection of life. The question is, when does that life begin? A partial birth abortion, however, I don't think is an abortion. That's an infanticide. And therefore, it should be outlawed immediately. When I first saw pictures of a partial birth abortion a year ago, even before I was even considered for this position, I said there's no way that anybody could support this procedure. And as governor, I would outlaw this procedure immediately.
Jim Greavy, you have rebuttal time.
Yes, I am pro-choice. I believe the question of an abortion is a personal, religious, and ethical decision of a woman. I do not believe it is within the proper interference of government.
Christy Whitman, your response.
I don't believe that politicians should be telling doctors what procedures to use when they get into an operating room as a conservative person. I believe that the viable fetus deserves to be protected, but I believe the woman as well deserves to be protected. With the partial birth abortion bill, I rewrote that to protect the viable fetus except in the case of the life or long-term physical health of the mother. The mother deserves to have her protection, as does the viable fetus. And that, I believe, is the appropriate balance for the state of New Jersey.
Next question goes to Jim McGreevey. Renee, it's your turn.
Senator McGreevey, a South Jersey paper quoted you as saying, "No city in the United States of America should look like Camden." Many say this South Jersey city has suffered from political neglect. What is your proposal to turn cities like Camden around?
As governor, I want an exercise of a vision of private capital investment within our cities. We can drive through many cities throughout the state of New Jersey and see literally hundreds of acres of abandoned factory sites. We need to bring those sites back to life. Frequently, it's cheaper to pay the property taxes than to invest in the expensive process of cleaning up that site. I believe in brownfields reclamation. Secondly, commercial tax abatements. It's always going to be less expensive to purchase an acre of farmland or purchase an acre of a grassy field than to reinvest in our cities. I believe commercial investments will provide the financial incentive for business to relocate within our city. And thirdly, I think it's important for government to provide a withholding income tax credit for businesses that locate within our inner cities. And lastly, educational standards of excellence. I want to be the governor who sets the bar high on educational standards of excellence, working in partnership with business and setting educational standards of excellence.
Governor Whitman, your turn to respond to the question.
When Mayor McGreevey went to Camden, he saw hell. When I went to Camden, I saw hope. Hope because of the good people who live there, and that's why we have been so aggressive in our programs to help that city, as we have been to help every city throughout the state of New Jersey. I am very proud that there will be new housing in Camden, as there will be in Newark and Trenton. We are ensuring that our cities have the opportunity to compete because, frankly, this state cannot survive and thrive as a state if our cities aren't thriving as well. And that means we work with the people who live in those cities, who understand what the problems are.
Mr. Sabrin, your comments.
We've had experience of more than 30, 40 years of government trying to solve problems in inner cities. We spent $5 trillion on anti-poverty programs for the past 30 years. The results, the rate of poverty today is exactly the same as it was when President Johnson declared his war on poverty. I think we need to declare a truce on the war on poverty and let the people have the freedom that they need in order to create businesses, create jobs. Camden is suffering from the last bastion of socialism in America. Camden needs freedom. And the other possibility is the jobs may be outside of Camden and people may just have to move in order to get those good-paying jobs and learn those skills. That's a possibility that no one is addressing in this
Okay, thank you. You're watching a live debate. We're going back now to another question for Governor Whitman tonight, and this one is from Herb Jackson. Herb?
Governor, there's two proposals at the opposite ends of the gun control spectrum pending in the legislature right now. One would make it easier for people to get permits to carry guns, something that is only open to police mostly in New Jersey right now. The other would require that any gun sold in the state be equipped with a device so that only the owner could fire it. The idea is that children wouldn't be able to find it and use it, and it couldn't be stolen and used by a criminal. Do you favor either of these bills, and would you veto either of these bills?
Well, Herb, I can't say whether I'd veto the bills or not until I've seen the final passage of those pieces of legislation. As you know, I do support the Constitution and the Second Amendment, but the most important thing we have to do in the state of New Jersey is to fight crime and keep guns out of the hands of criminals. That's why I signed 3 Strikes and You're In and the Cops' Bill of Rights. That's why I signed Jones' Law and Megan's Law. I want to make very sure that the people in this state are safe, and that's why I'm pleased that crime is down to a 23-year low in the state of New Jersey. We need to focus our efforts where they're going to do the most good. And that means we have to intercede earlier, particularly with young people, to stop this violence that we see young people committing, mindless violence. We need to start getting some focus on personal responsibility here in the state of New Jersey so people understand that when you make a decision, there are consequences of that decision, and you have to take responsibility for those consequences. Those are the kinds of things we need to work on to really solve the problem.
Thank you, Governor. Professor Sabrin, it's your time.
I think 3 strikes you're out is too liberal. It seems to me 1 strike and you should be out. And if you should escape from prison, then we got serious problems with criminals who are basically going through a revolving door in our prisons. We need to make sure that the punishment fits the crime and that prisons should house criminals who murder, rape, carjack, and do all those things that we are frightened of in our society. So what I recommend is that we have tough prison sentence, not 3 strikes, so you're out.
Thank you very much. Senator McGreevey, what are your views here?
As a former assistant prosecutor, I was proud to be co-sponsor of Megan's Law, proud to be a co-sponsor of 85% parole, and proud to be a co-sponsor of tough crime initiatives. But I believe on the question of gun control, we need to distinguish between those who legally have guns as opposed to those who illegally have guns. To increase punitive measures for those who illegally obtain aims and arms, I'm in complete and support of.
On we go now. Michael, you have a question for Murray Sabrin.
Yes. Mr. Sabrin, you went to New York City public schools, a public university in New York where taxpayer subsidies kept tuition low, another public university in New Jersey where tuition was kept low in the same way. You teach at a public college and presumably have a pension and health benefits paid for largely with public dollars, and you're using public dollars in this campaign. Some people ask, isn't it somewhat hypocritical for you to be talking about drastically shrinking government when you're such a product of taxpayer-funded programs?
Michael, that's a great question. If we don't participate in the system, we're considered hypocrites. I'm sorry. If we participate in the system, we're considered hypocrites. If we don't participate in the system, we're considered anti-establishment. We can't win. What I'm suggesting is we didn't create this system. We're participating in the system. We're playing by the rules. I believe the rules are not as good as they could be. That freedom is the essence of the American experience, not government mandates, government regulation, government handouts. The public school system that I attended was part of the system in New York City. The system that we have in New Jersey is part of the system I didn't create. I've always wanted to be an educator. That was my lifelong goal in 1962. First teach in the public schools in New York City, then teach at the college level. So I'm doing what I wanted to do in order to give me a career and get satisfaction in teaching young people. The fact that we have public system is not hypocritical on my part. We're doing the best we can. All I'm suggesting is we have an opportunity to do something really fabulous in the state of New Jersey.
I'm sorry, time is up. Mr. McGreevey.
Professor Sabrin thinks everything's wrong and the governor thinks everything's okay. I want to be in the perspective of making government work. We have some real problems in the state of New Jersey. We have the highest auto insurance rates in the nation. I have a plan for 10% rollback. Now we have the highest property taxes. And also, we have educational standards that are ranked lowest in the nation. I think government's responsibility is to live within its means, but to be proactive, to get the job done. And that's the kind of governor I want to be.
Governor Whitman, how do you respond?
Well, I was interested to hear Professor Sabrin talk about participating in the system when he didn't vote in the last two gubernatorial elections or the last Senate election, which to me is a basic part of participating in the system and deciding what kind of changes you want to make. But I believe very firmly that we can continue to do what I've done in the state of New Jersey, which is control the rate of growth of government to 1.8%, a 50-year low, and still provide the necessary services to people so that government is a partner with business and with the people, not an obstacle to success.
Okay, this is Debate 97. We're coming to you live from New Jersey this evening. Our next question is for Jim McGreevey, and it's from Herb Jackson.
Senator, it seems to be an unwritten but well-understood rule in New Jersey that you can drive over 55 miles an hour, but if you go over 65, you get a ticket. If that's happening, shouldn't we raise the speed limit to 65 so people know what the law is and can follow it? And if not, shouldn't we enforce the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit?
Herb, I think that's a reasonable request. I think we have to balance between how we drive in downtown Jersey City or downtown Woodbridge, as well as against how we drive on the Turnpike. What I believe we ought to do is to work with the bipartisan commission to try to examine where we can lift the speed limit, to be reasonable, to be rational, and then enforce the speed limit and enforce it effectively.
Governor Whitman, what would you like to say?
Well, in this, the most densely populated state in the nation, we have to be concerned about our speed limits, and that's why the Division of Public Safety and the state police have argued against raising that speed limit. There, unfortunately, even with having graduated 4 state police classes, we don't have enough policemen to be, state police, to be on those roads all the time to catch all the speeders. But we have seen instances in states where they have raised that speed limit where there is a vast increase in the number of fatalities and accidents. And that's the most important thing, to my mind, is keeping our highways and streets safe for the people who use them.
Okay, Mr. Sabrin, how do you see it?
I believe the speed limit should be 65 miles an hour. I don't think many people live in the New Jersey Turnpike, so it's not very dense there. What we need to do is have a speed limit that is consistent with the road conditions and the safety of our cars. Our cars are much safer today. The roads are in terrific condition. And so, therefore, let's have a speed limit commensurate with the ability of drivers. Now, there are some reckless drivers out there. Those are the drivers that should be punished. I've seen a lot of tailgating going up and down the state the last 2 months. That's where the police should concentrate its efforts.
Okay, time is up. Michael Aron, you have a question directed to Christy Whitman.
Governor, you keep saying that property taxes in Woodbridge under Jim McGreevey have gone up 43%. Every major newspaper in the state has pointed out the special circumstances surrounding that. The huge deficit he inherited from a predecessor who slashed the budget in a desperate bid to win re-election. It's said to account for at least 3/4 of that 43% rise. You promised a clean campaign. Why do you persist in hammering him with what appears to be this half-truth?
Well, because, Michael, I love the press's response. Anytime anybody cuts taxes, it was desperate and it was going to create terrible things, and you can't believe it was real, that they did it for a real reason, and you could maintain it. You know something, I walked into office, and there was a deficit over $1 billion, and we had a budget that relied on 10% one-shots. I was able to cut taxes and balance that budget, and now we have reduced the level of one-shots to under 3%. You can do it if you have the discipline, if you believe in cutting taxes and you believe in cutting spending. Jim McGreevey may have walked into problems, but to accuse his predecessor of having arbitrarily lowered property taxes, I think, is a judgment call that is simply unfair and untrue. And within that, don't forget, he raised property taxes 43% at a time that the aid to Woodbridge went up 16%.
Murray Sabrin, your response.
It seems we have two opponents of mine who believe in tax and spend and borrow and spend. We have a budget that's been going up year after year after year at different rates of increase. And we have spending and taxes that sometimes go up, sometimes go down. Governor Florio showed it was easy to raise taxes. Governor Whitman showed it was easy to lower taxes. When I'm governor, spending will go down. Not just the rate of increase, but the actual level of spending will go down. That will free up resources for the business community, free it up for individuals, so they can do what they want with their money.
Jim McGreevey, you have 30 seconds.
Unfortunately, the governor has continued to engage in this distortion. Between 1990 and 1997, the municipal property tax levy in Woodbridge went up only 7%, and the governor knows that. I was reelected 2 years ago with 70% of the vote. Governor, mayors that increase taxes by 43%, they're not reelected with 70% of the vote. They're not even reelected. But the point is, Governor, I found a town in fiscal disaster, a mess, and straightened it out. You found a balanced budget and have now left us with $10 billion of borrowing.
Time is up. Thank you. Let's go back to our panel now. Renee Smith, you have a question for Murray Sabrin.
Yes. Mr. Sabrin, you were just talking about one strike and you'll be out. New Jersey's prisons operate about 47% above capacity. Do you have a proposal to reduce this number and at the same time keep our community safe?
Thank you for that question. That's an important question. The fact that we're building more prison space is, I think, an indictment of our criminal justice system. There's something terribly wrong when we're incarcerating people year after year after year. Nonviolent offenders, there should be another program for them. People who commit white-collar crime, restitution should be made instead of housing them in prison. There are all sorts of alternatives to prison. The way I look at it, prisons have become graduate schools for criminals, and therefore we need to stop that. There's no point in incarcerating people. We're going to learn to be a better and better criminal. I think fines, halfway houses, boot camps, things like that make sense for nonviolent criminals. To put people in jail for offenses that don't pose a threat to the community, I think, is unconscionable. And to house these people at a cost of $30,000 and $40,000 a year is even more unconscionable, because now the taxpayers are being victimized twice. Once as a victim of crime, and then as a taxpayer to house all these criminals, who, by the way, get better amenities than a lot of people outside of prison.
You. Senator McGreevey, your time now.
I disagree with Professor Sabrin. If you commit any collar crime, you belong in jail if that is a proper conviction. But I think the challenge in the state of New Jersey is to focus on juvenile justice. Former Governor Thomas Kean had a tremendous program. It was called the Middlefields Program. It recognized that between probation and jail, there needs to be a middle ground. The Middlefields Program basically provided that if a young man or woman was in trouble a second time or a third time, we weren't just going to slap them with probation. We were going to put them in a setting similar to a boot camp and give them a rigorous academic environment and discipline.
You. Governor Whitman.
Well, I'm never going to apologize for putting violent criminals behind bars, and I'm certainly not going to apologize for the fact that today's number of crimes, today's crime rate is at a 23-year low. And I'm very pleased and proud of the fact that we have opened the first juvenile boot camp in the history of the state of New Jersey, not for second-time juvenile offenders, but for first-time juvenile offenders, so we can get them right at the beginning and intercede. And we've also opened alternative schools to take violent juveniles out of the classroom, but not let them walk the streets, make sure they're in a confined setting.
All right, our next question goes to Democratic candidate Jim McGreevey, and the question comes from Michael Aron.
Senator McGreevey, yesterday in Newark, you said your top priority as governor would be job creation and economic opportunity. That's been one of Governor Whitman's top priorities, too. During her tenure, New Jersey gained 196,000 new jobs. She lowered taxes on business, created a public-private partnership called Prosperity New Jersey, and reorganized the Commerce Department to promote business. How would you top that?
A number of ways. I believe, first, there's a basic problem with property taxes in the state of New Jersey. I think property taxes have a devastating impact not only on the business community and the residential community. What we've seen happen in Trenton is this governor did the easy part. The governor cut income taxes by a third, but increased state spending in Trenton by $2 billion. What did that mean? That meant that the state share of educational funding fell from 42% to 37%, and property taxpayers got hammered. I want to dedicate up to 50% of increased revenues between $750 and $900 million a year to provide for property tax relief. I think property tax relief is critical to provide for home ownership. Also, I believe in taking back those former factory sites for brownfields reclamation, providing commercial tax abatements to lowering the cost of business, and also withholding income tax credit to provide a financial incentive for businesses to offer jobs in our cities.
And response now from Governor Whitman.
Mike, it's over 208,000 more jobs today. And when I hear Senator McGreevey talk about my spendthrift ways, I'm reminded of the fact that in one budget vote of his, he increased spending in this state more than I have in 4 budgets. That's spending. We are going to continue to grow jobs in this state, in every part of this state, because we're going to work as a partner with business, not an obstacle to business, and create opportunities for all people at all levels.
Murray Sabrin, your turn.
All taxes are burdens on businesses. All regulations are burdens on businesses. You know it and I know it. The mounds of paperwork you have to file in this state is enormous. The amount of permits that you need in order to begin a project in the state is enormous, sometimes holding you up 3, 5, 7 years. So let's not kid ourselves. There's still a huge regulatory mechanism in place in Trenton. As governor, I would make sure that mechanism is downsized dramatically so we can create more jobs in the state and not have jobs leave the state, which the governor conveniently forgets to tell you.
Renee, your next question for Governor Whitman.
Governor Whitman, the state allocated $220 million to fund a tunnel that would provide easier access to Atlantic City Casino, but it would break up one of the few stable neighborhoods. What is the benefit of this allocation to the residents of Atlantic City, and how much of a say the taxpayer have in the decision?
Thank you for that question, because this is something where I've heard a lot of misunderstanding. First of all, the money that we are spending in Atlantic City is infrastructure money that benefits all of Atlantic City. And any one of you who have been to Atlantic City recently know the need for it, and if you live in Brigantine, you know you've wanted that connector. The particular development that's going to take place, the private investor who just made a cash contribution of $55 million, that, as far as we can find out, is the single largest cash contribution of a private person to a public infrastructure project. The benefit to the state of New Jersey is going to be over 60,000 jobs, 16,000 permanent jobs, over $200 million a year in annual revenues, $95 million of that going to help us continue our PAAD program for seniors and ensure that Atlantic City sees the kind of development that it deserves. And that's going to be the economic engine, not just for Atlantic City, but for South Jersey, and help the entire state of New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Sabrin. How do you see this?
I am opposed to corporate welfare. If a project is successful, it should be funded by the project owner and developer. That's the way our free enterprise system works. There's no need for having state funds subsidize one particular project, as good as it may be. This is the type of programs we have in place where large corporations come into the state and get subsidies, and they don't need those subsidies, because if they are successful, or they think they're going to be successful, they should be able to fund it with their own funds or go to the capital markets and get that funding.
Your turn, Jim McGreevey.
The problem is this governor's values and this governor's priorities. When the casinos came into Atlantic City, the money was supposed to come from the casinos to us. Now this governor is taking $220 million of our tax dollars and giving it to a billionaire casino developer. The tunnel should be built, but it should be built and paid for by the developer. The question is, this governor is spending $220 million of our money for corporate welfare. She's increased spending by $2 billion and leaving us with $10 billion of debt.
Time is up. We move on now to a question for Libertarian candidate Murray Sabrin. Herb, it's your turn.
Mr. Sabrin, New Jersey requires that no one who needs medical care can be turned away from a hospital, and it pays for the expenses of those who can't pay with a payroll tax. That tax is going to expire at the end of this year. Would you continue to require hospitals to treat people who can't pay, and how would you fund it?
Thank you for that question. I think this is one of the areas that I think we've totally mismanaged, the whole charity care business. In fact, the concept of charity by government is sort of an oxymoron. There are now organizations throughout the country that are providing terrific health care at no taxpayer's expense. One of the programs that I learned about in the past 3 years in investigating this area is Volunteers in Medicine, a program started, by the way, by New Jersey doctor, Dr. Jack McConnell, based in Hilton Head, South Carolina. He had a vision, helping poor people who didn't have access to health care. He gathered together doctors, retired physicians, and put together a facility. 2 staff people. The rest of the funds come from from individual contributions, corporate contributions, and foundations. It's successful. It works. This program can replace government involvement in healthcare throughout the country, because we all know that the nonprofit sector is much more efficient than the government sector. In fact, the data show it's 2 for 1.
Okay, Jim McGreevey, you can respond to the question.
Charity care is really a misnomer because the poor have Medicaid, middle class and upper class can afford health insurance. Charity care is basically health care for the working poor. There are 2 basic problems. One, how we deliver it. We require people to walk through the emergency room, which is the most expensive setting in a hospital. We ought to be providing clinical-based care. And secondly, it's also a fundamental question of insurance. We need to enroll people and manage healthcare programs to provide accessibility. And lastly, I would take charity care out of the UI fund and shift it to the general revenue fund.
Governor Whitman?
We have to come up with a permanent solution source of funding for charity care by the end of this year, and that's why I've brought together all of the stakeholders in charity care to make recommendations as to how best to do that. I've already indicated that any savings that we get, awards that we get from the tobacco settlement will go to charity care. And I am very, very proud of the fact that we have just announced a program to insure 100,000 uninsured children in this state. And by the first of the year, I want to announce the rest of that program, so we will ensure that every child who is uninsured in this state will be covered and can get the health care they need and deserve.
Okay, thank you. You're watching a live debate with the New Jersey candidates for governor tonight, and the next question is for Jim McGreevey, and it comes from Renee Smith.
Last month, a cyberspace tragedy hit Jackson, New Jersey. Following the death of 11-year-old Eddie Warner and the arrest of a 15-year-old, what role can the state play in regulating cyberspace pornography?
Well, I think it's predominantly a federal issue, but I believe that pornography is inappropriate, and I would support federal legislation to ban the use of pornography on the website or throughout web or interactive media. I think it's a dangerous tendency. But I also believe it goes to the heart of an even more basic question, that we need to teach our children the fundamental difference between right and wrong. In our educational standards, I not only want academic standards of excellence, but I also believe we need to teach our children behavioral standards. That is, that citizenship counts, whether it's honesty, integrity, hard work, or discipline. We've done it in other states, and I think the state of New Jersey ought to be promoting those high behavioral standards so our children know the difference between right and wrong.
Thank you. Governor Whitman, your turn.
Renee, we have already, and I've already signed legislation that increases penalties and makes it a crime to have child pornography on the internet or to be found in possession of child pornography. We have already, I'm glad to hear the senator say he likes to have high standards in the schools, because we've already put out standards for behavior in our schools. Every school district has it, and they also now have an ability they didn't have before, which is alternative schools for disruptive students, so we can move them out of the classroom. They're not taking away from the hardworking student, but we don't put them out on the streets. We keep them in a situation where they are being monitored.
Thank you. Mr. Sabrin, what's your view on this issue?
This is a very important issue, and here's where the government is trying to play the role of parent. The importance of parents in this issue is paramount. Parents have to know what their children are doing. We all know about the latchkey kids. Parents need to be in charge of their children, not the state. If we give up responsibility to the state, all things are possible. We need to be vigilant, ever vigilant, of what our children are doing, including having programs in place that block out these things on our computers.
All right, Herb, let's go back to another question for Governor Whitman tonight.
Governor, as you know, the income tax is constitutionally dedicated to reducing property taxes. Every dime the state collects, it has to give back out in state aid. You reduce the income tax, and you say that you've taken steps to lower the burden of property taxes. How would the average homeowner have noticed the effort you've taken to lower property taxes?
Well, Herb, right now the overall tax burden on people in the state of New Jersey is 14% less than when I took office, and that comes from a number of things. Over 4 years, we've put over $800 million, or $750 million more into education. We have increased spending to municipal aid and through municipal aid into districts by over $1 billion. It's now at $29.8 billion. But more importantly, we have given the tools to the municipalities to be able to control spending, because first and last, property taxes are a function of local decision making. Mayor McGreevey is an example of that. As we saw, aid goes up 16% and property taxes go up 43%. What we need to do is continue to work with municipalities to get them to control their spending habits, and do the same thing with our school districts, continue to provide aid as we have in the state of New Jersey, and ensure that everyone has the same kind of spending discipline that we've evidenced at the state level, where we've kept the rate of spending growth to a 50-year low.
Okay, it's response time. Mr. Sabrin.
What we need to do is get state government out of the mandate business. At the local level, municipalities are under this burden of mandates from the state government, increasing the cost of schools, increasing the cost of local government. I just received the facts the other day pointing out that these mandates impose tremendous costs on local communities. State government should get out of this business, thereby lowering the cost of municipalities across the state, and that, by the way, would reduce property taxes, or at least make them stable.
Mayor McGreevey, your turn.
Well, what the governor just said just isn't true. What the governor did is the easy part. The governor cut the income tax by a third, increased state spending in Trenton by $2 billion, and then cut the state share of funding to education from 42% to 37%. And who made up the difference? We did. Middle-class property taxpayers. Last year, Woodbridge Township lost $2.5 million of aid. Who picked up the freight? We did. My proposal is every year between $750 and $900 million come in.
Time's
I
up.
want to dedicate a portion of property
Michael,
tax.
our next question. Thank you. Next question goes to Murray Sabrin.
Mr. Sabrin, you say Governor Whitman has, quote, wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on highway sound barriers. Why is that a waste?
I was just on 287 this afternoon holding a news conference, and I saw these sound barriers being built, and I didn't see any houses. And so I'm wondering, why are these sound barriers being built if people don't live very close to the highway? And the other thing that's quite disturbing is 4 years ago, the governor, during her debates with Governor Florio, said that she would not build any sound barriers. It's right there in the record. And yet she's reneged on that promise at a cost to taxpayers of tens and tens of millions of dollars. It seems to me that if you believe something, you should follow through with it. In this case, it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. In fact, I was lecturing at the college this morning at a colleague's class, and a student said to me, I went to my friend's house. She lives off of 287, and the sound barrier was erected there. And guess what? The noise is not abated. In fact, our view of the mountain is now blocked. So she got a double whammy from the sound barriers. The noise is not abated, and her beautiful view of the mountains has been taken away from her. I think there's better use of that money to repair the highways, which need repair in the state of New Jersey.
Mr. McGreevey, your time, 30 seconds.
I think sound barriers are needed where there are houses. But the fundamental question comes down to is how we spend our money. And what we've seen happen under this governor is that state spending has increased by 13.5%. We have the 4 largest budgets in state history. And what the governor did is she raided the pension fund for $2.75 billion, and now we're going to have $10 billion of debt. Not for a bridge, not for a road, not for a sound barrier, just debt. This governor's legacy to the state is literally $10 billion
Okay, time's
of
up.
debt.
Sorry. Governor Whitman, what do you think?
Senator, I don't know if they put a sound barrier on that piece of road that you said it was okay to sell, for the state to sell to the highway authority. They may or they may not have. That's what we call the mother of all one-shots. Sound barriers are appropriate where people ask for them, and we have put more money into infrastructure, creating more jobs, improving our roads, making it easier to get around this, the most densely populated state in the nation, with more people driving on these roads than in any other state. We need to ensure their safety, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you. Jim McGreevey, you have the next question. Herb Jackson.
Senator, when you were an assemblyman, you voted to raise state taxes, and when you were a senator, you voted to lower them. If you're governor, which way would you go, and what would your standard be?
When Governor Florio came to the legislature, he said the tax increase was necessary to fully fund education and to provide for substantial property tax relief. And I admit the toilet tissue tax was not the greatest idea. But the difference is the governor lived within his means. What this governor did is she cut our revenues, our income tax revenues, by 1/3, but increased state spending by $2 billion. The governor then went to raid the pension fund, $2.75 billion. She went to Wall Street to borrow that money, except now we have $7.5 billion of interest, $10 billion of debt. As Bob Littell said, the Republican chairman of the Appropriations Committee, this governor's actions were fiscally immoral. The difference is Governor Florio lived within his means. What this governor did is the easy part of cutting the income tax, but didn't do the hard part of having government live within its structure.
Okay, thank you. Governor Whitman, you can respond to this now.
Unfortunately, Governor Florio lived within our means, not his means, and that was the real problem. In that first budget, and Senator McGreevey loves this $2.2 billion figure, the $2 billion figure, in one budget, he voted to increase spending more than I have in 4 budgets. That's how you keep control. That's how you live within your means. And there are more revenues coming into the state coffers today through the income tax, through the sales tax, and through the business tax than before we cut it, because tax cuts work.
Professor Sabrin, what do you say?
If I weren't in this debate, the debate would boil down to who's been the most irresponsible fiscally. Borrowing money to pay your current bills, I think, is totally irresponsible. No one borrows money to fund their 401k plan. Borrowing takes place for capital projects. We all know that. Spending should be done based upon the priorities of the state constitution to protect life, liberty, and property. Not giveaways, not welfare, not all the things that the governor would like to spend or Senator McGreevey would like to spend on.
Okay, time is up. Our live debate continues now, live from Whippany, New Jersey, and the next question is for Governor Whitman. Michael Aron.
Governor, we read news reports of people with cancer or multiple sclerosis who want marijuana for medicinal purposes. An MS patient named Cheryl Miller recently wheelchaired to the State House and demonstrated for 3 hours. The only thing that relieves her discomfort is marijuana extract. You were quoted that day as saying you're against medicinal marijuana. Why keep a drug that can give people relief out of their hands?
Well, Michael, if I thought that medicinal marijuana was the only way for Cheryl to relieve her pain, then we would certainly have to reconsider. But it's not. The NIH just came out, their most recent study showed that there are better ways to manage pain. And marijuana is a controlled, dangerous substance. We have to be very careful anytime we in government start to send cross signals to the people of this state, and particularly our children. When you look at our prisons and you see the number of people who are there because of drug-related crimes, they were either high at the time or they were going after drugs, Marijuana is a gateway drug. We cannot condone it, and there are better protocols to be used to control pain. I simply cannot condone medical marijuana until there is some unequivocal study that says this is the only way to relieve this particular type of pain, and there simply hasn't been any such study.
Mr. Sabrin?
On the one hand, the governor is in favor of a woman's right to choose, even if it means committing infanticide. On the other hand, she's not willing to allow a person in desperate illness to use a substance that her doctor approves of. I find that incredibly contradictory. So it seems to me, in a humane, compassionate society, if the doctor is supposed to give guidance, give medical expertise, and the doctor says this is a procedure that he believes in or she believes in, it would seem to me that in a compassionate society, we should allow the doctor to determine the treatment, not the government. In this case, I think it would be appropriate for the doctor to determine what's the best form of
Time's up.
medication.
Thank you. Senator McGreevey?
I happen to agree with the governor. I think it's wrong for society to send a mixed message. The Food and Drug Administration has clearly stated that there are better means than providing for experimental marijuana treatment to provide alleviation of pain. I think it's important we send a strong, clear, unequivocal message to our children to say no to drugs.
All right, tonight's final question comes from your moderator, and each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond. There will be no rebuttals. I think we've managed to cover some of the basics, the fundamentals of this campaign. I'm going to give you each an interesting opportunity right now. If you could be critical of one aspect of your opponent's campaign, what would that be? And let's start with Jim McGreevey.
I believe the issues we should be talking about in this campaign are the issues of importance to middle-class New Jersey. The question of auto insurance increases. We have the highest rates in the nation. We've had a Republican legislature, a Republican governor for 4 years, 12 rate increases. We need to talk about auto insurance increases and how we're going to bring those rates down. I've set forth a plan for a 10% reduction. I'd like to talk about auto insurance increases and how we're going to roll back those rates. Property taxes. Governor, there is a tax crisis in New Jersey. It's a property tax crisis. The governor says it's not my responsibility, it's not her responsibility. I want it to be my responsibility. I want to be the governor who takes on the property tax crisis, who allocates increased state revenues to reduce our property tax burden. And education. Education is the cornerstone to our children's opportunity. I want to set standards of excellence, not mediocrity. There were 2 independent surveys that said we had the worst standards in the nation. This ought to be the cornerstone of our future. And I want standards of excellence, not mediocrity.
Governor, to repeat the question, if you could be critical of one aspect of your opponent's campaign, what would that be?
I think that would have to be, if I were to be critical, disingenuousness. Talking about wanting to, I'm going to roll back, for instance, auto insurance 10%, when he knows that legally he can't do it. It's unconstitutional. And he fails to mention how he would pay for that when he talks about going after property taxes. Property taxes are a problem that we have worked on and we need to focus on even more. But when you talk about you're going to cut them back, where do you pay for it? If you were to eliminate the property tax, you'd have to double the sales tax or double the income tax, and the people of this state are not ready for that. When the senator gets up on his ads and he says in auto insurance, I want to be the governor that goes after fraud, that's great. Except I already signed legislation to take away the professional licenses of people who deal in fraud, and he voted against it. You can't be in 2 places on the same issue depending on the audience you're talking to. And I have to say, that's something we have seen over and over and over again. As governor, you've got to lead. You've got to know where you're going. You've got to know how to get there. And you can't keep changing depending on whose issue questionnaire you're answering.
Okay, Mr. Sabrin, you have 60 seconds to respond to the question. If you could be critical of one aspect of your opponent's campaign, what would that be?
Well, the governor takes an oath of office that says, I will defend the Constitution of the state of New Jersey to protect the life, liberty, and property of the people. For the past 4 years, there are many issues that have come forward. Oxygenated fuels, which are still harming people throughout the state. The EMT fund, the Emergency Medical Technicians Fund, which no one seems to know where the money is, that's dedicated for these great volunteers throughout the state. Where's the money? Regulation hasn't been reduced enough to make sure that businesses find New Jersey more attractive than they do so today. The partial birth abortion ban is a high priority item because it's infanticide. Sound barriers, wasting taxpayers' money. Education, more and more control in Trenton instead of the local communities. Environmental extremism at the DEP, hurting small business owners around the state, not because they're polluting, because they don't have a permit. Ask the Horner family, who spent $200,000 defending themselves against the DEP over 10 years, a nightmare for a family in South Jersey. Auto insurance. Why do we have the highest auto insurance rates? Micromanagement of this industry.
Okay, I want to thank you for responding to my question. And now it's time for our closing statements, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond in an order that was determined by a draw. Let's begin now with Governor Christie Whitman.
First, I want to thank the sponsors of the debate tonight for this opportunity. 4 years ago, you, the people of the state of New Jersey, gave me your trust, and you asked me to do some things. You said, bring hope back to New Jersey. Stop the hemorrhaging of jobs. Get businesses to stay here and to come here, not leave the state of New Jersey. Give us our streets back from crime. Make us understand that the money we're spending on our education is really going to help our children. And stop poverty and welfare that's robbing all of us. Well, today, the hope is back in the state of New Jersey. 14 tax cuts have left more money in your pockets, and we have become a more competitive state. There are more people working today than ever in the history of New Jersey, and we're called the economic engine of the Northeast. Megan's Law, Jones Law, the 3 strikes and you're in. 4 state police classes have driven crime to a 23-year low. And now, for the first time in the lexicon of New Jersey, we talk about academic standards, and we have accountability to go with those standards so we know that our children are getting the education they need to succeed. And moving welfare recipients to work and giving them the resources they need to stay there means that our caseloads are down 31%. We've got a lot to be proud of, but we have a lot more to do. The next things we must take on are auto insurance and property taxes, and I pledge to you the same concentration, the same focus on those issues that gave us the success we've had over the last 3.5 years. Together we can succeed, and that's why I need your vote on November the 4th to keep this state moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have a closing statement from Senator Jim McGreevey. Jim.
I was born in Jersey City. Dad's a Marine Corps drill instructor, my mom, nurse. Middle-class background. The governor's been there for 4 years with a Republican Senate, Republican Assembly. Other states have used the opportunity to stabilize property taxes or provide levels of educational excellence, but not New Jersey. We have the highest auto insurance rates in the nation. We have the highest property taxes in the nation. Now we have $10 billion of debt and the lowest educational standards. The governor tries to find every reason to protect and defend the auto insurance companies. I want to be on the side of drivers. Governor Cahill constitutionally rolled back rates 15% in 1973, and I'm going to get 10% rollback in 1998. The way I'm going to do it is that $160 of every $1,000 we spend is fraud. We shouldn't be paying for fraud. We should be prosecuting fraud. And a public advocate. The governor says we don't need a public advocate. I disagree. We've had 12 rate increases. Insurance companies have doubled their profits. How many middle-class families in New Jersey have doubled their incomes in the past 4 years? The way these insurance companies have doubled their profits. And on property taxes, I want to make it my problem. I'm a mayor. I see what it does to homeowners. We've got the highest property taxes in the country. I want to take half of increased growth and target it to reducing the school district tax levy. And for education, I believe in public education. I want standards of excellence. I want our kids to work, and I want to work with you. We need a governor with the right values and the right priorities.
Thank you very much. And we have a closing statement now from Professor Murray Sabrin.
I'd like to thank the sponsors for this evening's event and the opportunity to participate, the first third-party candidate in the history of New Jersey. When you go to the polls in 2 weeks to vote, the choices have never been clearer. Unlike my opponents, I want to phase out the income tax. The state did fine without it. Unlike my opponents, I want to phase out the sales tax. The state did fine without it also. Unlike my opponents, I want to deregulate the auto insurance industry and bring back free market competition to New Jersey. Your rates will go down just like they've done with long-distance telephone service. Unlike my opponents, I want to return power and money to local school boards, parents, and taxpayers at the local level to decide what type of education they want to have for their children. This is called freedom. Freedom from Trenton, the mandates, all the things that Trenton does to the people around the state. We need to have common sense government in New Jersey, particularly in Trenton. We need a system that will not force your cars off the road next February under this auto emissions testing scheme, which will be devastating to the inner city residents of our state. If I'm elected, the legislature will have to vote for me, with me, because it will be a mandate by the people. We want change. We're tired of tax and spend and borrow and spend. That's the choice before the voters this year. More money in your pockets, more freedom in your lives. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. And that wraps up our debate for tonight. We certainly want to thank all of our candidates for being here this evening. We want to thank our panel for being part of our program. And we also want to thank you for watching. A very special thanks to the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce for all of their fine work in making this broadcast possible and this debate tonight. We hope the program provided you with some insight to make your decision on Election Day. We certainly hope you will be voting on Tuesday, November the 4th, for the governorship of New Jersey. For all of us here, thank you very much for being a part of our broadcast. Have a good night. I'm Ernie Anastos.